In a world that can be challenging, and at times unpredictable, it's hard to find moments to focus on what you need. Join Stephanie James on The Spark as she guides you to use your inner flame to ignite your best life. As a best-selling author, psychotherapist, transformational life coach, and international show host, Stephanie is dedicated to helping you create a life that takes you, your goals, and your passions to the next level, so you can live a life that is fully lit up and fully alive. She believes that your life is meant to be a beautiful expression of the things that light you up. That by living your dreams, you give permission to others to do the same. Are you ready to feel alive and inspired to fuel your dreams and put a fire behind your desires? Let's ignite a spark in one another that will illuminate the world. The Spark, with your host Stephanie James, starts now.
Hi, I'm Stephanie James, and welcome to The Spark. So happy to have you with us here tonight. Just again, many thanks to everyone for wonderful letters and all of the great feedback that we've been having on the show. Tonight, we have a really special guest, CJ Liu, and I am so excited to have her here. She is this woman extraordinaire. She has a history as a CEO, a strategic consultant, and a coach who brings the know-how of more than 20 years of business, marketing, business development, technical product development experience to her client. So she is also a wonderful host of her own podcast, Fire It Up, that I had the honor of being on that show with her. And, you know, one of the awesome things is the blend that you bring to that show, CJ, which is this awesome blend of spirituality and science. Yesterday, I actually got on your archive and your website, and I was just looking through just so many guests and with just so much wisdom in so many areas. So first of all, welcome to the show. So glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you for having me.
You know, I know that this is, it's hard to pick, of course, a favorite guest. We've both had so many guests. I'm curious, though, for you, if you just think about those guests that made some of the most impact, and let's just rewind it just in the last year.
Yeah, I would say the ones that it almost has different impact for different types of things. So I had I've had experiences, just wacky experiences, because I've interviewed people with huge amounts of energy. So there have been times where I was interviewing John Burney, who has a practice, a sadhana, and his energy was so strong that I was laughing and could barely form a sentence. There was another gentleman, I can't remember the name of he was all about healing through vibration. And before the show, he must have been tuning into me, and I was feeling like nervous and like I was all shaky, and I was like, what is happening? And then I thought, oh, the guest must be tuning into me. And then I have these $500 lights here with like tiny little bulbs in them that are happening right now. For I don't know if the video is on or not, but
Yeah.
So I had these tiny bulbs, and it blew out the entire light. I got on this. Then one time we had this one. I mean, those were just one time we had this woman, and she was Susan Frederick, and she was talking about her dad that passed. And during the show, this is when it was CBS, there was music, old time, like 1940s music that was playing during the show. And the engineer who was managing the show in the background had no idea. She was going crazy. She was looking all over for the source and what was happening with the radio tower. She was completely, utterly confused. And I thought, Okay. It's her dad tuning in, how he's been able to tune into this frequency. But the guest, Sue Frederick, was laughing her head off because she said that's the kind of music my dad listened to. So she
Wow.
just knew it as a voice from beyond. So I think that those things impacted me from if you ever were a doubter or a skeptic, that energy is real, that there are
Right.
dimensions beyond our own. Those are instances where I I just felt and experienced something that impacted me very deeply.
Yes. Yeah. And the energy thing with your lights, that really resonates for me. I had Christian Strang on the video on the show about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we just kept blowing Zoom up when we were doing it. Was, thank God it was a recorded show and not live, because we literally, it would just shut down. Everything would get white and then shut down. So
Those
talk
are the
about a woman
worst.
with a lot of energy. Yeah.
That's the hardest. I interviewed someone about, I can't remember her name, about indigo children. And the same thing happened no matter what we tried to do. When we tried to record it, we just couldn't, like there was interruptions and weird noises that came through. I mean, I don't know, it's just, it's fascinating to me that that kind of thing could happen. I also had on when I was on Transformation Talk Radio, where you are right now, there was I had a guest who thought it was going to be a 10-minute show and it was a 50-minute show. So I thought, oh my gosh. And he was one of the leading experts in ADHD. And what made him a leading expert is that he had ADHD. So he really knew the topic really well. But if you imagine taking someone who has ADHD and them thinking it's a 10-minute show and it being a 50-minute show, it really irritated him beyond all belief. So the first parts of the show, he was just so irritated and agitated. I'm like, so tell me about the book. It's like, well, I don't have much to say. I mean, it was just these short clips the whole time. And and I didn't know what to do. So Dr. Pat was looking in the back and she saw his voice and it was like modulating. I'm not sure what kind of equipment they have in the back, but she said they saw him modulating at a really low band. And all I was doing, I was barely listening to what he was saying. And all I was saying in the background of my head is, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love
Mm.
you, I love you. And then he got to the point where I could actually increase the vibration. And she said it was incredible because he was down like this. I was going like this when I was asking him questions. I was vibrating at a higher, whatever. I don't even know what kind of thing that they were looking at. But she said that she saw this difference in the interviewing and the sound vibrations, and that at a certain point, it's like he kind of matched my vibrations. And that was another kind of extraordinary thing. So sometimes you think, I don't know if this stuff is real. I'm just going to say, I
Yeah.
love you, and see what happens. And it was astounding to see his voice match and resonate with mine so that the frequency was similar. So that was pretty cool too.
So cool. Thank you for sharing those experiences, because I know when we were on the show, on your show together, I mean, I think that there really is this thing to resonance and energy and things that it's like you don't believe at first until you experience them.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
just think that it's awesome that you've gone through these experiences. I'm curious too. Tell us a little bit about your background, to go from like a very business mindset. And then, it's like you are that perfect blend of spirituality and science, with this incredible business sense, and yet open to exploring all these things that are really becoming more into fruition, I guess, and more common knowledge
Yeah.
in our daily life. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was at Microsoft, and my dad had died, and during his death, I had all sorts of um, bizarre experiences. So the most bizarre this is of the there are like a dozen. The most bizarre was at night, the lights would turn on in a room and we had no idea what was happening. So at one point we unplugged the light that was turning on and it still turned on. And I thought, wow, there is something above and beyond this life in my rational understanding about life. And, he had passed, and that hit me really hard. I was probably 30, 34, 33, 34, no, 32 when he died. And I was very close to him. So it really impacted me greatly. But I think at that time, he was writing the last chapter of his book, literally, right? It was it's a manual that's probably this, it's sitting on my shelf right there. It's this thick. And he was writing the last chapter of the book, which was his life dream, and he died right before. And it was also the weekend that preceding his death, if he had not died 2 weeks later, my husband would have went and asked for my hand of marriage. So it was just this cataclysmic, like, how I don't understand what life is trying to say about the meaning of life. And so that's what kind of got me curious. I got the Tibetan Book of Dying, and I was really curious about, like, what is happening? What is the meaning of life? How are all these bizarre things happening? And then they just continued, all these strange things kept on happening afterwards. And then I had 2 kids, and I thought, you know what, if I stay here, and when you have 2 kids, it starts challenging what are you trying to do here? How important is work relative to the rest of your life? And it really began to challenge my priorities. And it was clear to me that family was my priorities, but yet work was so important because it fed my ego in so many different ways. Because at the time, Microsoft was the top of the game. It was a hot place to be. There were all these options. Like, it had all these really wonderful attributes to it. So I left Microsoft because I knew if I had stayed there any longer, I would never leave. So that's what allowed me to leave, is the death of my father, and then the recognition that if I didn't leave, I would never leave because it was too alluring.
Well, such a powerful story. And I want to hear more about this journey. We're going to need to take a quick break. And when we come back, more with CJ Liu. I'm so excited to have you here.
Me too.
Welcome back. I'm Stephanie James here on The Spark on Transformation Talk Radio. I want to let you know as well, please go on to stephaniejames.world to find out seminars, speaking events, online groups you can be a part of, and you can see the trailer for my new movie, When Sparks Ignite, coming soon. And also order the book, The Spark Igniting Your Best Life. So many ways to serve you, and there's a free offering. Just put in your email address and you'll get Igniting the Sparks Within meditation. So again, here with CJ Liu, thrilled to have you here. I love hearing about just your life journey. And were you always someone who was into spirituality, or is that something that developed? I mean, here you were, this Microsoft woman,
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that. My girlfriends and I used to do tarot cards, and that was probably the extent. And I remember being fascinated when I was in college, going to a psychic fair. But aside from that, I really had no. My parents both immigrated from China, and they like moved, during their formative years, where usually, you have a strong religion. They were just moving from one place to another during communist China. So my parents didn't have I'm one of those few people who have zero religion in their life, nor did I nothing. So I mean, I went to church. My parents, when we were trying to assimilate to the American culture, it said, you should go to church because it's a thing here. And I remember going, yeah, it's not for me. I'm not interested. No offense to churchgoers, but for me, it just really didn't seem resonant at all with my Chinese culture. So yeah, so no spiritual roots, at least.
Was it your father, your experience with your father that brought you more into that? Or what was it that put you on that path?
I think it was just this quest for meaning and understanding the meaning of life, and the metaphysical questions of who am I, why am I here, what is the purpose of life, and then reading materials and experiencing things. And I think what got me, I think, was probably um, I started going into coaching because I met a life coach, and I at a party, and I said, okay, what should I do? And she said, do the things that you love doing and that you're really passionate about doing. And so I did that, and I loved work-life balance, and I was very interested in myself and figuring that out. And so I figured I would teach what I knew at that point, which I had done a lot of work. So I done that, and then I taught a class, and it went incredibly well for all the women, because I did it very much like a Microsoft event. So I had, surveys and questions and, whole thing. And the women had ranked it, 5 out of 5. Like, this is just what I need, these wonderful comments. And then the guys ranked it, 4 to like a couple of ones, where I got, will you just please stop, shut up, will you please just shut up
Oh
about
my
these things?
God.
And I thought, oh, I see. I must have hit a raw nerve. I must get some skills, because as a marketing person, it doesn't make you a coach. So I went back, got training as a coach. And I think that was, I didn't really understand energy until the end of that coaching class, where they had us write down our mission statement. And you get in a group, and they reflect what they see in you. You articulate what's important to you, yourself, and they do things like you're a tree. You do all these kinds of exercises to like facilitate all that information. So I did that, and at the end, I'd like come up with the statement, and it was like, okay, I got to read this. It was not a big deal. I had done public presentations before. I read it, and my body just started convulsing. I was like shaking. My whole body was shaking, and then I burst out crying, and I thought, what's happening to me? What is going on? And so I think that was the first time I experienced just a surge of energy. Like I had somehow touched upon the essence of who I was at some level, or I
Mhm.
was getting literally a wake up shake at least. And that was the thing that I think made me get curious about energy, as well as coaching has a lot of spiritual ideas in it. So that, and I think I was during a time when I experienced looking at work-life balance, I was really unhappy. And I thought, why am I unhappy? I have this incredible husband. I have these 2 great kids. We live in extreme material comfort. Like, what is the problem? And I thought, well, it will get better when this happens, or it will get better when this happens. And I kept on waiting for this to happen. And that thing would happen, and it would last for like 5 seconds, and then it would go away. And I thought, and I remember sitting there and saying, you know what, after Thanksgiving, things are going to calm down. And then, or after Thanksgiving, and I'm like, no, 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 it's after Christmas, things will calm down in the household. And then I thought, and I sat there in the car, and I figured, it will never calm down. This is just like, this is just like an erroneous construct in my mind. And that's when I got to get help, when I went to get help through a spiritual counselor. And that's probably when spirituality kind of became a real thing for me.
Yeah. It's interesting how we can look at these external programs for happiness,
Hmm.
and we all have them. All you have to do is pick up a magazine or watch television, and we're bombarded by these scenes of drink this and you'll be happy, and go here and you'll be happy, or look like this and you'll be happy. And it sounds like, I mean, you were able to find that part where happiness is really from an internal source, and connection with, whether you call it your higher power, divine source, your, essence. And then it transcends whatever even the most wonderful material, things are in our lives, or whether we have the greatest job, greatest family. In the end, there's something more.
Yeah. And I think For me personally, I think that all those things are true. And for me personally, it was removing all these limiting beliefs and expectations about what I thought life was all about. And it was almost like, if you talk about, growing a garden, I had so many weeds that I couldn't even see. I couldn't see the flowers amongst the weeds. And so for me, it was more about doing, of which I'm sure a lot of your clients they come in to do hardcore work to like, what is happening? What's the root cause of this weed? Let's pull it out. How did I get here? How did I get here? And how do I make sure that the weed doesn't come back by pulling out all the roots of this? So that was, for me,
Yeah.
that was in it. I don't know if it was the techniques that we used were energetic in nature, but it was more about reducing, eliminating all these societal beliefs that I believe to be true. For me, at least, that's what it looked like.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm really resonating with you. I think that's been my journey as well. And that's what I work with my coaching clients and other, my psychotherapy clients with,
Yeah.
is how do we first recognize what these limiting beliefs are? Because so many of them are these subconscious underground beliefs that we have that we don't even realize are ruling our lives. And
Hmm.
so first it's kind of excavating what are those limiting beliefs. And then I think there's so many modalities, but I love that you did energetic work. There's, EMDR, there's all kinds of different things that we can do. And there's actually just cognitive restructuring. So we
Mm.
start weakening the links between our beliefs and then, the physiological response that goes with that.
Hmm.
And how do we kind of rewire so that we're creating a belief system that actually serves us
Hmm.
and is probably a lot more accurate?
Yeah. I'd be curious, though, from your experience, what do you find is the most efficacious? Does it depend on what presents before the person comes, or is it like, how do you decide as someone who has this like gigantic tool set, which things to bring? If I don't have the last part you talked about, but I have some of the other things like EMDR and EFT, but how do you
Yeah.
bring in those? How do you decide which of those tools that you bring with your client?
Such a great question. And, I think with my own clients, it is that initial assessment when we're first together. It's kind of determining how deep is this, and is this, a big T trauma? And if
Mm,
it's a big T trauma, we know that it's harder to just think about it or rationalize our way out
mhm.
of it. It's not stored in that part of our brain. So
Ah,
trauma's in that, fight or flight response, and it's so subconscious oftentimes, the belief. So at that point, we know we're going to go down the path of EMDR. And I
mm,
feel like with every client I work with, and my, my thesis work and everything in graduate school was around cognitive behavioral therapy. So I have this real kind of ingrained, like, your thoughts are leading to your behaviors, and that's leading, to how you're feeling. And then this is a perpetual cycle.
mm,
So if we can just start identifying, and I go through this format with almost everyone that I work with, which is looking at the different areas in their life and determining, and again, a lot of it's subconscious. So we have to do
mhm,
some techniques of float back mindfulness, where we're going back and going, what are the messages I have received and have internalized in these specific areas of my
mm,
life? So it might be finances, it might be work, it might be what it means to be a man or a woman in the
mm,
world.
mhm,
It might be around spirituality, fitness, so we really go through those so we can start unearthing what is it. And once we
mhm,
have a handle of it, then it's, I go back to this mnemonic device of naming is taming.
mm,
So like if we're
mm,
aware of it, we can start naming it, it loses its power over us.
mhm,
It's no
mhm.
longer, like you were talking about, the roots of the weeds below the surface. It's something we
Right.
can grab a hold of and say, okay, now what can I consciously work at to start
Mm,
changing these beliefs, which there's several, a lot of things you're talking about, EFT tapping. And I think there's also, I do a meditation right now where it's like you allow that energy to come into your body. It's like when you get triggered, you
mm,
identify like, oh my gosh, this is what's here right now.
Mhm.
Instead of trying to tell a story about it, you breathe
Mm.
through the feeling and
And
you let
feel
it
it.
be there. Yeah, which
Yeah.
is tough. And then you let it go, which is really powerful.
Yeah.
And so that tends to be some of the tools that really help shift things for clients. I know, yeah, in my own personal experience, there are things that I've used as well to start letting go, letting go. And as you and I both know, this is continued work. There's
Oh,
no one point of arrival.
yeah. Yeah, although I would say that based on my experience, there is a point, at least for me, I went through therapy for a long time, like 10 years going through this weeding. And then there's a point in which I hit stuff where I'm like, now I really can't come in with any serious, um, like any issues that I think are actually worthy to approach. Like it's more like, I really can't stand, Ethiopian food. Like this can't be something I go to a psychotherapist with. Like
Right?
it's no longer in the realm of like this is. So I mean, I had weeded stuff so much that at a certain point, it like clears, at least from my own personal experience, it cleared out so much of the weeds that I could just think clearly and be clearer. And it's not that the weeds don't show up every now and then, and but I can see them and I can pick them faster, and I can pick them on my own. And then with all of these practices that I've been learning that are more energy based, you can at a certain point, the energy just solves everything. It just kind of it's like an energetic storm comes and then just pulls it away. And sometimes you don't even, I mean, I'm at the point now where I thought I was done doing all that work, but as you know, as a psychotherapist, and I didn't know this until recently, is there's a whole bunch of nonverbal trauma that happens before you're even either before you're born, because it happened in a past life, or at birth. And those things you are not even cognitively aware of. And those are the kinds of things that you can't even go to a psychotherapist because there's nothing to talk, like you don't even
Yeah.
remember. And so you just sit there in meditation and open up to it. And for the last month, I haven't gone to therapy, but I've been sitting in meditation and just some days grunting out of just screaming out of anger, crying,
Mm.
um, grunting, and I have no story whatsoever aside from it's super weird. I'm crying, screaming. My husband is wondering what's happening in the basement because I usually scream in the basement as not to torture him because I have a really loud voice. So, yeah, it gets to a point where the therapy, I mean, there is like some like point in which it could end, you know what I mean? And that
Mhm.
something else comes about, that it's about clearing the stuff that you don't even know, but it's still there and is still clouding your
Mhm.
viewpoint and not seeing things clearly. So I do think there is an endpoint just for folks that are like, will this ever end? At least for me, I found that there is an endpoint. I don't know if what you find with your clients, but
Well, and yeah, and I'm glad that you're making this distinction, because what I was saying was not that everyone needs to be in therapy the rest of their lives. There is definitely an endpoint to that. And I always tell my clients, my job is to work myself out of a job,
mhm,
truly, because I do want to empower them. And then that's what we're doing. We're practicing how we can assimilate these beliefs, how we can assimilate these behaviors, and then practicing in the, quote unquote, real world.
mhm,
So when I say, that, we're never done, really what I'm referring to is that as long as we're breathing, we're on this journey of self-discovery, and
mhm.
that we're going to continue to have, even if there's subtle weeds come up, we're still human. So we're continuing to evolve as long as we're alive. And I guess that's really what I'm speaking to. And I'm so glad that you said that, because I think we need to know it can get so much better. And I
Yeah,
have found that as well as I have done my work. It's not that you're never triggered, it's that you get out of it so much more quickly. And so that is such a hopeful and important message. As long as you're doing the work and showing up for yourself, it might be with a therapist, it might be with a life coach, it might be like CJ, you're sharing like on your meditation mat. It might be yoga, it might be Tai Chi, whatever it is that brings you into that center, you can continue to grow and evolve. And so this is a lifelong journey.
Do we have time for one more thing that I want to share? Or I don't know what when you.
Let's do it right when we get back. We have
Okay.
1 minute left. And so I'm excited. Give us a little teaser. What is it that we're going to get into when we get back?
It goes back to it's infinite, and it's infinite in both. Some ways it never ends, and in some ways it gets infinitely better. It's about infinity. That's what it's
Ooh.
about.
I love it. I love it. So join us when we're back from commercial break here on The Spark with CJ Liu. Welcome back. This is Stephanie James, and I am here with CJ Liu, who has this amazing podcast, Fire It Up, that I was just honored to be a guest on. And CJ has just a wealth of experience, so much wisdom. I mean, not just through your business sense. She was with Microsoft. She was a CEO for 20 years, 20 plus
I
years.
was a CFO.
Oh, excuse
Just
me,
to
CFO.
clarify, and yeah, not for 20 years, but for like for 3 years, about 3 years.
Okay. When I was reading your bio, I was just, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just don't want to misrepresent myself.
Yeah. No, regardless, you have had this amazing career, and now how awesome sharing this perfect blend of science and spirituality, and you just have this awesome message that comes through in your shows. And it was so fun looking at your archives. I was sharing earlier in the show that I had been looking through that yesterday, and just like, oh my gosh, I could spend the next couple of days just listening to your guests. So, you had before break, you kind of gave us this little bit about talking about infinity.
Yeah. So I've often wondered, well, I've wondered who's enlightened and who isn't that I talk to. And what I realized is that the best person I spoke to was Joseph Goldstein, and I said, who is this Buddhist? And I said, would you describe yourself as enlightened? Which is a really obnoxious question, but I just asked it anyways. And he said, I don't know if I would say I'm enlightened, but I'm constantly lightening up. And I thought that was the best answer ever. And now I think the terms have shifted from enlightenment to awakening. And I think awakening in some ways is a better term, because we're constantly waking up every single day. We close our eyes at night and we wake up to, what we believe is the reality of what this world is all about. And I've talked to people who are awakened. They're awakened at a very, very, very high level. And you know what? They're neurotic and get crazy. And so I wanted to, because we were talking in the last segment about how, it never, you're constantly doing the work, it never ends. And I thought, yeah, that's true in the sense that, your work can be infinite, but then but what happens is the thing that you mentioned on what reminded me is the thing that you said. You do the work, and then what happens is something comes up and it's gone like that. And I interviewed Lama Surya Das, who is like one of the few lamas in the United States. And during the interview, I said, Lama, what do you do? Like, you're an enlightened guy, or like you're a highly attained spiritual guy. What do you do when you get mad? And like, when's the last time you got mad, and what did you do? And he said, well, I'll tell you when it was. It was when the Red Sox lost, whatever, in the whatever inning, and I just couldn't believe it. And then I'm like, well, what do you do? He's like, I talk to a tree. And then I said,
what?
I go yell at a tree because it can take it. But I love that he was like very vulnerable. Like you still, just because you are spiritually have like a very high awakening, it doesn't mean that you are perfect, that you don't have emotions, that you still need to do work. It's that it was interesting when I was talking to Lama Surya Das, he would get worked up, and then and it would he would like talk about something like, yeah, I'll tell you what got me mad. I was in a car, and then and he won't. It was like I could feel like a little hurricane going up like this, and it dissipated like that. It just dropped immediately, and literally probably as a second after he said it, he was able to let it go and just get to a place of because of recognizing that when you're I'm not there yet, but my imagined thing that happened, not that he said this, but what I would imagine happened is he wound up about the guy that cut him off in traffic, and he started getting mad, and he's like, it's not real. This is a story in my head. The fact that this guy cut me off because he was a jerk, I don't really, like what
Mhm.
normal people who aren't at that level would have to kind of work themselves out of the story. He had gone through that path so many times that it was like, boom, like he just dropped immediately. So I thought that, so the work does happen all the time. And even
Mhm.
if you're a very high spiritually attained being, it still happens because you're human. And anyone who tells you that it doesn't, I just fundamentally don't believe them. Just run the other way. And the other thing that someone told me, which I also have found is true, is that that it gets infinitely better. I went to a presentation on Joe Dispenza, and he had said at the end, this is after a week-long meditation and these heavy duty, kind of like very heavy duty meditations where you're doing tantric breathing. He doesn't call it, but that's basically like what it is.
Yeah.
And he and people were just like totally in a bliss cloud, right? After this thing. And he said, the thing that's amazing is that I keep on thinking this is the best that it can be. This is the best that it can be. And I realize that it keeps on getting better because when you recognize that um that the universe is infinite, or love is infinite, so is the pain is infinite. It's
Mhm.
infinite, so it just keeps on growing, you just start seeing things and reacting at a higher and higher evolved level. But nothing nothing in some ways it ever can last for very long because it's gone in a second. And if you work at that level of attainment, which I'm not at, but it's been interesting. So I would just go back and slightly edit the thing that I said before, and that yes, you can do a lot of weed whacking, and as you said, the work happens all the time, no matter how spiritually attained, enlightened, whatever you are. So
And
that's my only edit to what I
no,
said before.
I love it. I feel like those are just really important messages because I think people, when they look at thought leaders and they look at luminaries and they're thinking, wow, their life is so incredible. And it's like, yeah, and their life is still human,
Yes, absolutely. And they're
and
human. Like, unless they're
yeah.
not human, which means like I wouldn't, like, if they're a spirit, I probably couldn't interview them unless they're on the Sue Frederick show that I did. But yeah, they're human, so they're going to have human issues. We're meant to have human issues. That's why my belief is that we're meant to have human issues. We're incarnated in a human body because there's something special about being human.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we were talking during the break. What do you think is something that you would recommend for people to do? How do they help themselves get through at these triggers, these things that come up? Because as a life coach, you have a different way of going about this, or what would you recommend?
Mm. Um, Coaching is very different than psychotherapy. So it's very similar in some ways, but different. So the way in which coaching is structured is that you have a goal. So someone comes in with a goal, and when they come in and they're paying you to achieve this goal, it means that they're open, willing, and hopefully able to change. And so if those three things aren't really operative, then coaching may not be the best thing for you. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so I think if it is, I talk to a lot of business people who come in with a specific goal, like I want to get promoted or I want to get along better with this person. So it's very narrow, specific. And oftentimes when I go down, like what's happening, and they're like, well, this person just blah, 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 series of complaints, then it's like, well, that's really interesting because we've had, several conversations with several different people and they always followed the same format. Have you noticed that? And they're like, yes. I'm like, well, it seems like there's a pattern. And then we get to the thing that you're mentioning, right? So where did that
Yeah.
pattern form? Where are the beliefs that are associated with it? But it's anchored in that kind of modality. I think it, and you would know better than I would psychotherapy, but when I've gone to psychotherapy, it seems like, you may not know, you may not have a goal. You just may know that you're unhappy or, you want something, you don't even know what it is. And it seems like, I don't know, you tell me, is that, I don't know when do you go to a psychotherapist necessarily. I know when to go to a life coach.
Yeah, I guess for me, the distinction would be what I find the difference is in between my two sets of clients
Oh
is,
yeah, because you do coaching. I'm sorry, I forgot that. Thank
yeah,
you.
so I'm a transformational life coach as well. So I do psychotherapy, which I just do, in my office, and it's a lot of it can be very crisis oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, a lot of times it's a client that's just reached that point where like, I can't do it anymore. I don't know how to do it anymore.
Mm,
I'm feeling really stuck in my life. And what I find with my transformational coaching clients is they're coming in, I think a lot like you're saying, with like, my life is good. And I might have one stuck point that's keeping me from getting to this goal. Like you're saying, it might be
yeah,
relational, it might be a belief system. But it's a different level of intervention, if you will. It's a different level of, because you don't necessarily dive into the past.
right.
You're saying, okay, and I do this, I think, with my psychotherapy clients too, but it's like, how do we move you forward now? Sometimes in psychotherapy we have to go back and do some cleaning of the cobwebs
Yeah.
ahead
And
of
so I
time, and,
think,
and once in a while I do with my coaching clients as well, but I would say on the majority it's just a different level of, like you're saying, very clear, this is what I want, this is what and I'm willing to put in the work, 100% invested, where every client that comes to me, not necessarily, I mean, they're there, they want help, and yet sometimes, I've, and this is rare, but I definitely have had the experience where people are like, yeah, I want you to fix me.
right. And I'm not willing to do the work. And I
Yeah.
just want to come in here and talk all the time, which is
Yeah.
fine. That would not be an ideal coaching client for me. I'd be like, well,
Right.
okay, let's move you on to a different methodology. But I
Yeah.
think that it's interesting that you describe it that way. And I think that, so the resources is, there's a lot of coaching, therapy kind of resources. And like, I think we described what the differences are. And I think, because not everyone can afford coaching or group coaching. It's expensive, right? But I think
Yeah.
that there's so many wonderful books out there. And so you'd asked her, like, what do you recommend? I'm like, yeah, why don't they get your book? If you like, Stephanie, you enjoy what you hear, like, get her book, The Spark Igniting Your Best Life. There's so many, because what I remember of the book is that it's about gaining clarity. And that's the coaching piece. If you don't have clarity with what you want, then how are you supposed to get there? Once you get clarity with what you want, then there may be impediments. We call them weeds in the show. And that's also in your book on tools and techniques that you can reach to get there. And then I think that, finding some type of spiritual practice of some sort, because what coaching and transformational coaching or psychotherapy does when you have like the right person holding a space is there's a container of love, warmth, and energy.
Mm.
There's also things like yoga and and spiritual practices, of which there's so many, like whether it's your mind running amok and you want to do mindfulness, or if it's about some of the things resonated that I spoke about with energy, then do something like a yoga technique or a tantric technique that's out there that's about dealing with energy. There are a lot. So I would say complementing those um, technologies, I would describe them. I mean, you can call them spirituality, you can be any religion and still use these technologies. And
Yeah.
then individual one-on-one support if you can afford it, or getting a book. There's so many great books out there, like Stephanie's book. So those are the things I think are kind of the next best steps.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. That just touches my heart, and I appreciate that so much. And so, CJ, where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can find me on firedupwithcj.com on my website. And then on YouTube, I have a channel called Fired It Up with CJ. So you can find me all there, and all the shows that I've done for the last 10 years are there.
So wonderful. Well, CJ, thank you so much for joining us tonight and just sharing your wisdom and your experience, your heart. It's just such a delight to have you here.
It's been a delight being here. You're a great interview. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And we'll see you next time on The Spark.
Thanks for tuning in to The Spark with Stephanie James. Remember that you already have what you need to live a life that is fully lit and fully alive. You're already holding the flame. Now it's time to ignite your best life. Learn more at stephaniejames.world. That's stephaniejames.world. And tune in next week at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, only on transformationtalkradio.com. Shine on!